I have thoughts. A few weeks ago, I watched the 2001 CBS TV Movie of the Week adaptation of the book by Joyce Carol Oates, Blonde. Even though the budget of that production was clearly $12 and some of it is very cheesy, it does a good job of telling a Marilyn Monroe story. My biggest takeaway after watching both the 2001 version and the 2022 version is that the person who hates Marilyn Monroe the most is author Joyce Carol Oates. That is the hottest take to end all hot takes. Shut down the internet right now. Does that hold up to scrutiny? We will find out. I draw that conclusion for two reasons. One, seeing both versions tackle the same scenes and reading that the 2001 version tried to be kinder to Marilyn, while the 2020 version is much more faithful to the source material. And two, Joyce really likes and defends the 2022 version. It seems to have captured the tone and vision she had intended. Never, and I mean never, trust the author when they like or dislike an adaptation. Stephen King hates the Kubrick version of The Shining. Roald Dahl doesn't like the OG Willy Wonka movie. Anne Rice didn't think Tom Cruise would be a good Lestat. Tom is the best part of that movie, and Lestat is the best role of his career. Well, maybe the second best. That might be more of a scorching hot caliente take than the last one. I know I'm like the millionth person doing a video talking about the Netflix Blonde 2022 adaptation. You've heard all the takes, you've digested all the ethical arguments, you've probably watched a Marilyn movie to see what the big deal about her is. I'm not here to beat a dead horse or regurgitate the same points all those other videos have. I agree with most of them. I will be leaving links to the best videos on all the things wrong with Blonde 2022 in the carcancha down below. Even though I agree with most of those videos, the one thing I don't agree with is the discourse on the ethics of a movie like this, or any movie. Unless the talk of ethics includes how directors treat actors or crew, or if a movie perpetuates harmful ideas, then sure, let's talk about ethics. But ethics to explain why movie bad? No. First off, I don't care. Secondly, it's not like good ethics equals good movie. Plus, most folks on the internet don't have the qualifications to discuss ethics. I took an ethics class in college, so maybe technically I could, but I won't. Ethics should be for medical professionals, law enforcement, and politicians. In a higher education setting with experts and other folks who have letters before and after their names. Had I made this video around the time all of the hype and backlash happened, I might have gotten some traction on this small, little teeny tiny channel. But I'm glad we are doing it now. After a lot of thought, after a lot of ruminating, after a lot of analysis, I have come up with my ultimate conclusion about this movie. It is ultimately pointless. We will get into it. Today, I want to focus on three main things. This is a Latin Hispanic channel, so I focus on Latin Hispanic topics. Ana De Armas stars as Marilyn and Norma Jean? Question mark? She is enough of a connection to the Latin Hispanic stuff for me to do this video. The male versus female gaze. Also, of course, how this movie is all fondant and absolutely no flavor. Plus, for fun, my ideas for an interesting and controversial Marilyn movie. This video is heavy on the film school nerd stuff. You've been warned. While gathering research, my thoughts, and hot takes, I like to ask different folks about their thoughts on whatever topic is up for discussion in these videos. Getting other experiences and points of view are really helpful to make these videos better and more well-rounded. So I was asking my BFF and fellow Marilyn fan, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. If she had seen the movie and her thoughts. Sarah had not yet seen it, and after reading how terrible the movie is, she opted not to watch it. A very good life decision. Your life is so much better because of it. In our conversation, I mentioned... How do I say this delicately? Marilyn performs a job in this movie. Sarah, like the rest of us, was horrified. Then she said, no wonder they got a minority to play this role. And Sarah pointed out something that has not been talked about at all when it comes to Ana De Armas playing Marilyn Monroe and Norma Jean? Let's get into the one thing people mention about foreigner Ana De Armas, the accent. I'm only discussing it because it does have to do a little with why I think she agreed to do this movie. To weigh in on the discourse of Ana not being able to drop the accent completely, I only have two things to say about it. One, it's hilarious how folks who only speak one language and barely criticize those who speak two or more languages for having accents. If you have an accent because you speak two or more languages, that's because you learned the second language after childhood. You fully learned a language as a child and you told your brain, hey bro, we are going to speak an entirely different language now, in addition to the language we already speak. Good luck. So you have to teach your brain, mouth, teeth, tongue, and vocal cords to do very different things than they are used to doing. So now you have an accent. Ana has an accent and couldn't, for some parts of the movie, get rid of it completely. Who cares? The folks who care, it's because they can't stand the fact that foreigners have the brain capacity to speak more than one language. Their brain no work good and it hurts them. Like my mom says, es porque les arde las nalgas. And I agree. 2. The only reason anyone noticed the accent is because the movie is bad. Had the movie been good, no one would have noticed it. In Blonde 2001, Australian actress Poppy Montgomery, who plays Marilyn and Norma Jean, also has a weird accent thing happening. I swear, at some points in both of these movies, Poppy and Ana have the same bizarre accent happening. It's kind of wild. Because the 2022 version is not good, every little bad detail sticks out like a sore thumb. If the story was interesting, or the movie engrossing, or you cared about the characters, you wouldn't notice anything wrong with the movie. You'd be too busy enjoying it to nitpick silly things like minimal accents. My theory is that Ana De Armas took this role and put up with the humiliation of this role because she wants to be taken seriously as an actress. Oh, the parallel struggle. Norma Jean constructed the dumb blonde Marilyn persona so well, she had a hard time escaping it to do more serious acting. Ana, being a Latina, has a few things to overcome. Beautiful Latinas with accents don't do well in Hollywood. They are always sexy lamps or comedy relief. The Latin sex pot or the female clown / spitfire. Part of that is the accent. Hot ladies with accents are part of a long racist tradition in Hollywood media. Being beautiful is part of this equation, but being foreign is the main problem. Women in general are not taken seriously. Look at how women's rights are being treated in the free world presently. Beautiful women, specifically, are not taken seriously as heads of business, in politics, in tech, as people in general. That's why when a gorgeous actress wants to be taken seriously and win some prestigious awards for acting, she'll get uglied up and win a lot of acclaim and prestigious awards. Women of color and foreign women don't have these same opportunities. Rarely will you see a woman of color in a big important prestige film transforming to gain acclaim. And even when it does happen, the woman of color still is not taken seriously. Foreign women don't get this opportunity at all, because then we'd have to take not only foreign women seriously, but all foreigners and immigrants seriously. Maybe treat them like human beings. And who wants that? Ana wants prestige and to be seen as an important and serious actress. She is not just a sexy lamp or a Latina stereotype. Blonde 2022 was supposed to gain her acclaim, win a ton of awards, and make her an A-list star. Blonde 2022 did not do that at all. So Ana went through all of that embarrassment and humiliation for nothing. I'm so sorry, mija. Ana wanting prestige and acclaim is why she went along with all she had to do in this movie. The fact that Ana is a Cuban foreigner with an accent made it easier for the director to not only demand her to do everything she did, but no, Ana wouldn't complain. If this Norma Jean Marilyn role was played by a white actress, I guarantee you she would not have been humiliated and embarrassed on screen like Ana was. A white actress would have had the power not only to veto the pornography, but also would have had a whole system to back up her decision and not be labeled as difficult or a diva like a lot of actresses of color who stand up for themselves are. If Ana had stood up for herself, there would be a lot of talk. Who does she think she is? Or she's lucky to get this opportunity. And if you think I'm exaggerating, chew on this. Why is everyone super outraged at what this movie does to Marilyn and her legacy, but no one is outraged that Ana is the one who was put through all of that stuff on screen in the first place? Yeah, it's bad we have to watch Marilyn do a job for like 5 minutes, but remember who actually had to do it on screen. So we are back at the top of this section with the wise words from Sarah. No wonder they got a minority to play this role. I need a little more outrage on behalf of Ana, please. Blonde 2022 didn't do anything to help Ana or her career. Hopefully, Ballerina will. Director of Blonde 2022, Andrew Dominik, said that the movie is through a female lens, the elusive female gaze. Right. Since this movie has a lot of leering, fetishized images of Ana as Marilyn, I'm only gonna talk about that, right? That is what the male gaze is. Talk about how beautiful women are portrayed on film. Director Andrew Dominik, I know you're watching this because, of course you are. Let's see if I can help you out. Your movie is bad, but everyone makes mistakes. I used to like Tarantino movies. To err is human, to forgive divine. Here we go. Andrew, bro, I feel like you didn't finish reading the Wikipedia article on the female gaze, and it shows in this movie. Maybe you'd benefit from an intro to cinema class or a survey of film class. There is always 1 week where feminist film theory and the male gaze are discussed. Depending on your teacher, that week goes a little deeper into the male gaze than the Wikipedia article you skimmed before making this movie. And those classes might help you in reading a film's text. Based on how you interpreted Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, you might need a lesson or two on reading a film's text. I wouldn't have thought a fun, lighthearted, romantic comedy musical romp from the 1950s would be so hard to interpret, but hey, sometimes you take a swing at a ball and hit nothing but air. It happens. It's okay. Andrew, bro, if you can't take a film class because of the high cost of college, maybe read the entire Wikipedia article or watch film YouTube. I bet you'll learn a lot. Let's quickly address the leering of Marilyn's body. Fell asleep there. Wow, we live in a society. At least Michael Bay has more artistic visuals and interesting sequences. Plus, you never feel gross with Michael Bay's sexy lady footage. They just look hot and patriotic. If this footage is supposed to be commentary on the fetishization of Marilyn, why are you fetishizing her more than anyone else has ever done? This is a meaningless section of the movie. Look at how society likes to fetishize women. Yeah, and what about it? I want to contrast this with a scene from Blonde 2001. In the 2001 version, we get a scene where one of Norma Jean's mom's boyfriends tries to molest a 7-year-old Norma Jean. This scene is obviously much more disturbing, but it also speaks to something about women and society. Many women have their first sexual advance when they are very young. The burden of staying safe and not being too provocative falls on the shoulders of young girls. It's always be careful, you know how men are, and never stop being a creep, sir. This molestation scene is from the female gaze and does point out how women are sexualized from a very young age. This scene is we live in a society, but for real. This is the female gaze because men wouldn't know this happens. They don't realize comments about young girls filling out nicely or policing spaghetti straps is sexualizing young girls. That stuff really messes with girls becoming women and how society treats females in general. If you're a male and are surprised by this, talk to some females in your life. That surprise might turn into horror. See how one scene has nothing to say and the other has a lot to say? That's all I'm going to talk about in terms of women in female versus male gaze. Let's move on to what's not really talked about, but super interesting to me. How men are portrayed in the male and female gaze. It's called the male gaze because in simple basic terms, that is how men look at the world. The world through a straight, white, cisgendered male point of view. Since this is the mainstream point of view in movies, film scholars and analysts focus on how male directors portray women. Until more recently, scholars and analysts haven't really studied how men are portrayed in the male or female gaze. Since I am a feminist who thinks the patriarchy is possibly more damaging to men than it is to women, let's talk about the men in this movie. Andrew Dominik seems to think female gaze means all men suck. All men are terrible. Andrew, bro. I should probably stop saying bro. Andrew, son. Maybe you need an intro to women's studies class as well. Feminists don't hate men. We hate the system of oppression and subjugation called the patriarchy. And as I stated before, the patriarchy is more damaging to men, maybe more so than to women. So the blanket statement this movie makes, all men suck, is meaningless. Where do I get the all men suck read from this movie? All the males in this movie are abusers, assaulters, one-dimensional mustache twirling bad guys. Do I want to sympathize or identify with these bad men? No, of course not. But if you are going to feature bad men in this story, you better be saying something meaningful. The first assault we witness is that of Norma Jean and Mr. Z. It happens and we move on to the next traumatic experience. Why did we see this assault? Andrew, if you're going to use assault and abuse as character development, you need to have a reason for the trauma. This assault in the 2022 version is only there to be edgy and gritty, I guess. The assault in the book, it's all from Norma Jean's point of view, and we see how she compartmentalized it. That is the price she has to pay to be a star. It's messed up, but serves a purpose in the larger narrative, and also has something to say about how the abused often excuse and justify abuse. In the 2001 version, Norma Jean is assaulted and justifies the assault, like in the book. Then later in the movie, once Norma Jean is Marilyn and a big star, Norma Jean hits on and reminds Mr. Z of the time he assaulted her, and Mr. Z is disgusted by her and walks away. In this version of the assault, it shows how assault is more about power and not so much about sex. Mr. Z has all the power as a studio executive and can do whatever he wants with no consequences. Once Norma Jean gets power, she turns the tables on Mr. Z and lets him know she has the power now. She is the captain now. If assault was about sex, like many folks confuse it with, Mr. Z should have been excited Marilyn is hitting on him. But assault is about power, and since he doesn't have it here, he is disgusted and walks away. Blonde 2022 has nothing to say about assault other than look at this man doing assault. Let's look at another example. Norma Jean's marriage to Joe DiMaggio. Joe abuses Norma Jean, and it serves no other purpose than look at Joe abusing Norma Jean. The movie has nothing to say about abuse. The most basic thing this section could portray is the cycle of abuse. The abuser hurts the abused, then they apologize profusely and promise to never abuse again. Then when things seem to be going well, the abuse happens again and the cycle repeats. The abused will always make excuses or blame themselves for the abuse. Another thing to show is how hard it is to get out of an abusive relationship. There is stigma, there is shame, and this story takes place in the 1950s, so there are less options or resources to get out. So much can be said and shown about abuse other than look at the abuse. Blonde 2022 makes abuse meaningless. There's a pattern here. Men being abusers and assaulters just goes along with the narrative that all women hate men. No complicated characters, no introspection, nothing but men bad. And that's stupid. Men aren't just bad. There is a system that excuses bad behavior. There is a system that tells men to be aggressive and abusive in order to be real men. There is no dissection or analysis in this movie. Just missed opportunity after missed opportunity to say something. This movie says nothing. Men are bad. And that's a meaningless statement. The female gaze seems to know how to address difficult, complicated subjects and know how to say something about them. The male gaze can also do this. The problem is that Andrew Dominik has nothing to say about anything. Like everyone else, after watching Blonde 2022, I was super upset and frustrated with the movie. I was like, look at all the bad things this movie is saying about Norma Jean and Marilyn. This movie has major incel energy. While really thinking about it and going over all the elements in this movie, I realized this movie has nothing to say about anything. anything. Nothing to say about abuse and assault. Nothing to say about Hollywood or being a star. Nothing to say about trauma and patterns of hurt. Nothing to say about personas and image. Nothing to say about iconography or mythology. Nothing to say about the powerful versus those with no power. Nothing to say about Marilyn Monroe or Norma Jean. Nothing to say at all. Once I realized this movie is about nothing and has nothing to say, it became ridiculous. Not angering or upsetting, it's just pointless and pretentious. Most things that are pretentious are stupid and pointless anyway, so... And that is where Blonde 2022 stands. It's all aesthetics and zero substance. I laugh because I can picture folks who think they are intellectuals say, well, I understand what this movie is trying to say because I am an intellectual. LOL. What is there to understand? How did I come up with that conclusion? This is about to get super nerdy, so buckle up. A movie, TV show, book, painting, poem, music, play, musical, comedy show, etc. are all trying to communicate something. The actual show, music, poem, etc. is called text. Things like interviews, making of documentaries, introductions to books, etc. are called paratext. Paratext is for analysis and scholarship, or for nerds who really love a text and need to know every single solitary detail about the text. Paratext is meant to enhance the text and give it a fuller meaning. Paratext is not needed to enjoy or understand a text. The text itself is enough to extract all meaning from it. The fact that folks are scouring interviews Andrew Dominik has done to find some meaning, to find some clues on what he's trying to say with this movie. As if Blonde 2022 is the pinche Da Vinci Code and the interviews will lead us right to the holy grail of meaning. This lets us know that no one has been able to discern meaning from the movie itself. The text of the movie, from fade in to fade out, should be the ultimate statement of what Andrew is trying to say, if he's saying anything at all. Spoilers, he's not. If you need to do additional work to understand what a text is trying to communicate, that text has failed or has nothing to say. Let me give you a quick example. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Matrix. I've seen it 1,000 times and it's just a masterpiece of filmmaking that changed cinema forever. Now, to understand or enjoy The Matrix, do I need to listen to and read all the interviews everyone involved with the movie has done? Do I have to research cyberpunk and philosophy? Do I have to read Simulacra and Simulation plus The Invisibles? I want to, and I have, but it's not necessary. Is any of that paratext crucial for my understanding and enjoyment of The Matrix? Absolutely not. It helps enrichen the whole viewing experience, but all the meaning and what the movie is trying to communicate is there in the text. From fade in to fade out. It's all there and it's wonderful. Now, let's get into some specifics that have nothing to say in Blonde 2022. Hollywood bad. Hollywood is the worst place that destroyed Norma Jean and Marilyn. That is where Norma Jean was assaulted and is constantly harassed and leered at. But Hollywood is the only place she is safe, has power, and is happy. The leering happens in a controlled environment where she could have her skirt blow up and dudes are at a safe distance whistling at her. She is assaulted, but then becomes a big, important, powerful movie star. So it's a good thing? Norma Jean and Marilyn have all the power on set. She can reject a low-paying role. She can be late. She can mess up her lines over and over. She cannot show up. She can completely stop production at will for whatever reason, and she never gets fired. She never gets punished or yelled at. Everyone treats her with kid gloves. Norma Jean is the most powerful person in Hollywood because she gets butts in seats. And everyone in Hollywood will bend at her will. So again, good thing she was assaulted to get her big break in Hollywood? Blonde 2022 is a horror. Norma Jean has no power in her real life. She just sleepwalks through scenes and other people make decisions for her. Usually a horror is trying to communicate through extreme cinematic language, an extreme version of something already happening or something that could happen. The forced abortion scene is shot like a horror, but it makes no sense as a horror. When women are in a regular horror or body horror, forced pregnancy and birth are the actual horrific part because women's rights and women's autonomy is always under attack. Horror reflects the anxiety and terror many women face. If they get pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant, they can't decide what to do without government involvement or face legal repercussions. Forced pregnancy has been a common theme in horror for a long time. From Rosemary's Baby to Alien, it reflects a real-life anxiety about not being able to have a say on what you can and can't do with your body. A forced abortion is not a thing. Blonde 2022 shows a couple of forced abortions and the horror that comes along with it. It's not horrific because it's not a thing. As much as pro-life folks want you to believe forced abortion is a thing, it's not. If you were to go get an abortion and you changed your mind, you can leave. No one will stop you. No one will hold you down and forcibly open you up like in this movie. Aside from that not being a thing, I guess this is supposed to represent how Norma Jean had no say or control in her life. Hollywood was in charge. Okay, here Norma Jean has no say, and that's bad. What about her divorce to Joe DiMaggio? First off, no one forced her to marry Joe. She made that decision for herself. After the abuse, Norma Jean divorces Joe. How did that happen? Norma Jean, who at most points in the movie makes no decisions, things just happen at her, doesn't seem like she has the wherewithal to make a big decision like divorce her abusive husband. Either Norma Jean does have a say in her life or she doesn't. And it's a good thing Hollywood made the decision to divorce her abusive husband for her. So again, does she have control over her life or doesn't she? The other thing that could count as horror is the assault scenes, particularly the one with JFK. You know what makes that assault less horrifying? The weird joke Marilyn makes on her way to see JFK. She says, "I'm just his sex toy," or something like that. So when she gets assaulted, sure, it's horrifying, but it's lessened by that line she says before the assault. Like, she knows she is going to get assaulted and it's okay. That's what she's there for. And that makes things less horrific. If this is meant to represent men in power who assault women and face no consequences, where's the part where Norma Jean goes to tell someone the assault happened? In a horror, after the assault, normally the character tells the authorities or anyone who will listen, and they either don't believe the assault happened or no one cares the assault happened. But in Blonde 2022, Norma Jean doesn't tell anyone. There isn't even a part where she wants to tell someone but talks herself out of it because she is seen as a slut and he is the most respected and powerful man in the world. None of that happens. Norma Jean just chooses to say nothing for no reason. It's not so much a horror as it is showing clearly that the movie has nothing to say. So even its main character says nothing at critical points in the plot. Let's contrast this to Blonde 2001, where Norma Jean says the same sex toy line. Instead of this line being said before an assault or immediately after, Norma Jean is talking to her makeup artist and he asks her about the relationship with JFK. Norma Jean has this sad look as if she is remembering the assault, then makes the offhanded remark as a joke, a really bad joke. Here the line and the assault are tragic, sad, and horrifying. Horrifying because even in private with her makeup artist, who will not blame her and will be sympathetic to her, she chooses to make a bad joke about it. Norma Jean here has compartmentalized not just that assault, but all the abuse of her life to the point where in order for her to function, she has to pretend it's all a joke. It feels so real to have Norma Jean make jokes about trauma like a lot of us do. It's a coping mechanism which makes sense and makes everything else in the story that much more tragic. Those are just a few examples of how confused this movie is because it has nothing to say. You know how else I know this movie has nothing to say? When you read interviews with Andrew Dominik and other folks involved with this movie, they keep changing what the movie is trying to communicate. First, it's about men in power. What about men in power? No one challenges them or points out how bad they are. Plus, there are no good men in this movie to contrast how bad these other dudes are. So, it's very one-dimensional and boring and has nothing to say about men in power. Then, it's about daddy issues. What about daddy issues? These dudes have daddy issues too, and they seem to be doing just fine. Norma Jean calling everyone daddy means nothing for a couple of reasons. First off, calling all men daddy is the equivalent of me calling everyone bro. It means nothing because if everyone is daddy, then no one is daddy. Secondly, if Norma Jean wants daddy's approval or whatever, shouldn't she be dating only men that look like or remind her of her father? She dates and is involved with all kinds of dudes, none of whom look like or care for her like a father would. Why would she then want kids if her daddy issues would make her want someone to take care of her like daddies do? This movie infantilizes her a lot, so it doesn't make sense. How can this infantilized woman want and care for a child when she herself acts like a child all the time? Makes no sense. Also, Marilyn is able to have a successful career and her problems stem from mental health issues more than daddy issues. Blonde 2001 is more about mommy issues, and that makes way more sense. Norma Jean is orphaned because her mom couldn't take care of her. She couldn't get adopted because her mom wouldn't allow that to happen. Norma Jean wants to have a family because she wants to give her kids the love and support she never got from her mom. Norma Jean is also kind of mad that her mom's mental health issues are the only legacy she's left. So Norma Jean being conflicted about wanting to have kids and not wanting to have kids makes more sense in the 2001 version. Mommy issues are more relevant and interesting to Marilyn's story than boring ass daddy issues. Then the movie is a cautionary tale about what? Staying away from abusers? Taking better care to carefully monitor your drugs and other barbiturates? The movie is a look at celebrity culture and how it destroys people. I'd argue that being a celebrity made her happy and maybe saved her life. All the abuse and assault happens independent of her celebrity. Marilyn isn't constantly hounded by the press. She is able to live her life and have control over her career. How does celebrity destroy her? Plus, how can celebrity destroy a person when that person is a nothing character? Norma Jean doesn't really talk. She makes no decisions. Things just happen at her and she goes along with it. And the bad things that happen to her, it doesn't matter. matter. She just moves on. That's not a person. That's not even a caricature. She's a video game avatar. In this movie, Norma Jean is a Sims character minus the walking into walls thing. She needs to build a pool and take out all the ladders. Then the movie is about persona and manufacturing an image. No, it's not. I'd buy that if Norma Jean behaved and spoke one way and Marilyn behaved and spoke another. But she is always talking with the Marilyn voice. Always. She always looks the same and is always glamorous. Always. She is always suffering or crying. Always. Where is the division of personas or the exploration of a carefully crafted image? Nowhere to be found. Norma Jean has the line, Marilyn Monroe doesn't exist, while looking like and talking like Marilyn. It would have been way more interesting if while the hate mail is being read to Norma Jean, she would go from Norma Jean to Marilyn. What is Marilyn's reaction to the hate mail? They're just jealous. And she goes back to being Norma Jean. Those haters aren't attacking Norma Jean, they are attacking Marilyn. And that's fine because Marilyn doesn't exist. A point that was made earlier in this movie. That would have been more of an exploration of two personas, and it shows how Marilyn was constructed to shield and protect Norma Jean. Now that would have been interesting. Finally, the last thing I saw is that Blonde 2022 is an experimental film. That is the biggest cop-out ever. Throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. If Andrew Dominik had something to say with this film, he'd do what all other pretentious art people do. He'd say the movie is about this, and if you don't get it, it's cause you're dumb, and end it there. But he can't, cause he has nothing to say. Experimental film is a lazy way to say it's art, you're not supposed to get it. Okay, bro, let's go with that. It's an experimental film. Let's compare it to other experimental films. The only other mainstream experimental film I can think of is the 1998 Gus Van Sant Psycho remake, a confusing and ill-conceived movie. It's a shot-for-shot remake of the original. Everyone agrees it's an experimental film, and folks mostly cut Gus Van Sant a lot of slack when it comes to that movie because he is a good filmmaker. While I don't think Van Sant has anything to say with the Psycho remake, I do think he had something to prove. This is completely my film theory headcanon, so it could be wrong. I think Gus looked at the trend of remaking movies and wanted to prove that remakes are always a bad idea. No matter how talented the filmmaker, no matter how faithful to the original it is, remakes are always a bad idea and will never be received well by critics or audiences. So, the Psycho remake has more of a reason for existence than Blonde 2022 does. Chew on that one. Blonde 2022 is boring and meaningless, and not because it's unethical or disrespectful, it's lame and frustrating. If I were to make a movie about Marilyn and Norma Jean, what would that look like? I wouldn't make a Marilyn or Norma Jean movie because I have nothing to say about her aside from I'm a fan. While that should be a factor in making a biopic or story about someone's life, that can't be the only factor. But the bare minimum should be, this person is interesting. Let's show the world how they are interesting and why folks like them. That's the bare minimum. That's like down here. Bare minimum. I do have two ideas. They are not ethical and might be offensive, but they are interesting and controversial for real. Not in the edgelord incel troll posting kind of way. The first idea starts where the JFK assault happens. Norma Jean is assaulted. She has to pick herself back up. Then we cut to that tragic day in Dallas. After the assassination, the camera pans to the left, and who do we see on the grassy knoll? Marilyn mother-loving Monroe. She faked her death and is an assassin now. Code name Blonde. That seems super distasteful, doesn't it? Yup, but at least it's interesting. Plus, if you're going to do a scene that is so upsetting, disgusting, and potentially defamatory, the part that follows should be even more upsetting, disgusting, and potentially defamatory. Like, if you're gonna do it, freaking commit to the bit and make the wildest, most bonkers story you can. Not this piddle of nothing of a movie. This should be a drinking game. How much can I dunk on this movie and Andrew Dominik? Second idea is more serious and I think actually has something to say about celebrity and personas. The movie would be Norma Jean and Marilyn, but in the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of way. Marilyn should be a persona Norma Jean invents, then that persona starts to take over her life. The distinction between the two should be more obvious. Marilyn gets Norma Jean into a lot of trouble and situations that are not easy to get out of or are dangerous to be in. As Norma Jean's mental health deteriorates, Marilyn takes more and more control over her. It gets to the point where through mirrors and reflective surfaces, Marilyn talks to Norma Jean, Marilyn taunts her, and is really mean to her. The only thing that shuts up Marilyn is drugs and other barbiturates. It all escalates until Norma Jean dies. Andrew Dominik claims that one of the ideas he had was to explore why Marilyn would kill herself. Andrew, bro, it was an accidental overdose or an assassination plot by the Kennedys. With my idea, the drug abuse, erratic behavior, and eventual death makes sense. Norma Jean's mental health, hearing voices, drug dependence, culminating in her death make narrative sense, make logical sense, and doesn't frame anything in a, well, she deserved it kind of way. Like a lot of parts of Blonde 2022. My bonus idea is Blonde is about how misunderstood Hillary Clinton is. That would be bold, that would be controversial, that would be interesting. That would be a real statement on women, power, feminism, celebrity, persona, perception, and misogyny. If someone wants to be controversial, daring, and provocative, make Blonde the Hillary Clinton story. Te regalo esa idea, Andrew, porque soy muy generosa. Espero mi cheque en el correo. The most annoying and frustrating part about Blonde 2022 is that it tricks you into thinking that it is grandiose, important, and intellectual. It is none of those things. In terms of depth, if Blonde 2022 was a body of water and you stepped into it, you would not get the tops of your feet wet. This movie is so shallow, it's hilarious. But it's so deep and profound. No, bro. It's shallow and pointless. When I was trying to categorize this movie, at first I thought it was all style and no substance. But that would be giving this movie too much credit. A lot of all style and no substance movies are great and cathartic, like Moulin Rouge or the John Wick series would fall under this category, and those are fantastic movies. So that's out. Then I realized Blonde 2022 is a pointless movie, in the same category with the Emoji Movie and the Human Centipede. Pointless. No reason for existing. Doesn't advanced film technology or storytelling. These movies are upsetting and ultimately forgettable. After this video, the last of the hot takes, no one will ever talk about this movie again. I doubt it'll develop a cult following or be talked about in any positive way. Even the cinematography that is touted as impressive isn't really. Andrew recreated Marilyn iconography. So, photo filters on your phone can do that too. Madonna reappropriating Marilyn's image is actually saying something and is artistically motivated. They put Ana in place of Marilyn in the movies. Again, so they've been doing that for years. It was impressive when Forrest Gump did it. It's a cheap trick in this movie. Even Marilyn Manson's We Live in a Society name was successfully controversial and somewhat interesting. Joyce Carol Oates has something to say with her book. She seems to admire and hate Marilyn all in the same breath. And it's valid to have complicated feelings about a complicated figure. Plus, the book is at least a statement worth talking about. The 2022 adaptation, Ni Madres. The thing that irritates me the most, not just with this movie, but with anything about Marilyn, is this need to de-romanticize her. Why? What did she do that made people want to take her down a couple of pegs? Marilyn was beautiful and died young. That's it. Those are her only two sins. Yet, she needs to be de-romanticized. Wild, because as a society, and especially in Hollywood, we freaking love romanticizing bad men. We love it. Criminals, drug lords, abusers, pedophiles, assaulters, racists, murderers. All of these folks are mythic, almost heroic figures. Nothing but step on my throat daddy energy with these people. Marilyn, though, we need to expose the truth so people will stop admiring her. Yeah, she accidentally overdosed. But so what? Male celebrities accidentally overdose too, and no one thinks that makes them a bad influence. So again, why do we have to de-romanticize Marilyn? There's a lot of misogynist incel energy when it comes to telling Marilyn's story. That's why a lot of us who are fans feel the need to protect her, like we protect our friends and other women from misogynists and incels in our real lives. I'll protect men too from incels and misogynistic ideas. Whew. This is probably the longest video I'll ever make. Only like 3 of you will watch it, and I hope you guys appreciate my hot takes and endless dunking on Andrew's pointless movie, Blonde 2022. If you have seen this flick, tell me all your thoughts about it. I hope my points made sense. And Andrew, bro, next time you make a movie, make sure you have something to say, or hire a director that knows what they are doing and can help you make a serviceable movie. Good luck. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, salud, mi familia. You know what's interesting? That Suzanne Summers never played Marilyn Monroe in like a biopic or a made-for-TV movie or anything, because her performance as Chrissy Snow on Three's Company is inspired by Marilyn, something I noticed.